What would have happened had Jesus gone back through that town by a different road? What would have happened had he taken a way, a different way, into the city? Jesus had many things to do that day. He had a plan, he had things to do. He had only so much time to do it in. He had a posse to help keep him on track. But when he saw that mother in distress, when he saw her broken heart, when he saw a woman who had lost everything, and I mean everything, his heart broke for her. And he stopped everything. And immediately, they knew that this was not going to be a normal day. And immediately they knew this day was not going to end well. Jesus could have rushed past that woman crossing in front of him in the midst of the commotion, but he didn't. No, he stopped. He stopped everything, and he touched the casket. Now, this was not a good thing to do in that world. Touching that thing rendered him a sinner, first of all. Unclean was the word they used to use. That means nobody would come around him or touch him. Yep. What he did there along the way on that road was going to change the day big time. But then they witnessed what he did next. He gave a son back to his mother, and he gave a mother back to her son. And in that moment, something that was dead in both of them came to life. And I imagine the disciples at the end of that long day talking about what had happened that day. And looking back on that day, they remembered that day, that was the day Jesus gave a mom to her son and a son to his mother. And how they brought it up again and again, what happened that day over the years, become decades, until that story found its way into the text 2 millennia later that we just heard proclaimed here this morning. I can just see them sitting around those fires at night, laying in under their blankets, under the stars. Wow, remember when? Remember that day? Wow. And I'm reminded of when the prophet John was having his doubts about Jesus. And so he sent some of his friends to say, "Are you really what we were looking for?" And Jesus just said, "Tell John what you've seen. Tell him what you've heard. Tell him what you saw happen along the way, along those roads we walked together. Remember?" I think many of us hear this story as yet another miracle story, another superhuman feat by this superhuman Jesus. But I would bet you that that was not how they saw what happened on that road that day. I'd bet they saw it as a miracle, yes, but a miracle actually that any of us could perform. Even them. You see, the miracle was that a person could be that present, so there in the moment, so paying attention, that he could stand there in the midst of all this commotion with such an open, spacious heart, that he could feel something for this woman, that there was a space in him where he could be affected by another person's suffering, that he could be that present to her pain, that he could be broken open by another human being he did not even know on his way to many things with lots of plans and stop there in front of her. To live in that open, spacious way together. To be able to have all this commotion around us and be so present that we can be so paying attention to what's right in front of us. That's the stuff of miracles. That's what opened this to possibility. They saw a miracle. And the miracle was that a human being could be that alive, that in the moment, not in an unreal past or an unreal future, so present really only to the past and the guilt of yesterday and the shame of what we did before, that we can't really be here right now with these people doing what we're doing, are so full of anxiety about the future that we're not even here, we're living in the future somewhere down the road, but so there to what was right in front of him. He did not miss the moment. And being present to him, he could not respond. How you doing with that? How you doing with being that attentive to what's right in front of you? How are we doing with being that alive to what's right here, right now in front of me? I want to tell you something of a Jesus man who was in many, many ways just like that for us. We have had working around us here this man who most of us didn't even know. Most of us never met him. And as Linda announced at the beginning of Mass, for a quarter of a century he served here at the CSC. He and I began here together 25 years ago. He coordinated maintenance here all those years. And Brian will be retiring in just a couple more weeks. He's seen a lot in these 25 years of tremendous growth. And with growth always came more work. And with work came more challenges. And he was always up to it, because he knew this was what God wanted to be happening here. He managed to make everybody's job here on the staff a lot easier so that the rest of us could focus directly on students. His passion was to make students feel comfortable here by doing everything from mopping floors and cleaning toilets to handling contracts and carpentry. As a matter of fact, Brian built these risers the choir is sitting on. This huge choir is sitting on right now. One of our staff called him the backbone of the Catholic Student Center. What he did was invisible and essential. And like a backbone, he held it all together. Nothing was too big or too small for Brian, and he did it with great grace. Like when he would pray while he was working. Like when he was so able to admit his mistakes quickly and say he was sorry. Like when he always seemed to get to this place of integrity. Because of the way Brian did his job these 25 years, I want you to know this, because this man has been invisible to you for most of this time. Because of the way he did what he did, no one on this staff, none of our students ever looked down on him, this man who cleaned toilets for them. They looked up at him. They looked up at him for doing what he was doing with such love, for doing the littlest things with great love. He is that Jesus man who walked these roads with his heart wide open and could be very present to the need that was presenting itself to him right then, to whatever was broken, broken toilets and broken hearts. Indeed, we looked up to Brian for that. He was our unsung hero, actually, these 25 years, who never really got the attention the rest of us did, because we're out in front all the time. But today we sing of him. Today we sing of Brian. Not because Brian needs it, but because we need to do it. It is good for us to do. We are incredibly grateful that 25 years ago, Brian took this road into his city. I asked you what would have happened if Jesus had taken a different road that day. What would the disciples have talked about that night around those fires and under those stars? I'm telling you, that same miracle would have happened. The same miracle would have happened because this person, Jesus, would have walked down that street, that particular street, with the same open and spacious heart, paying attention to what was happening right in front of him. And at the end of the day, the apostles would have had another story to tell of what happens when our hearts are present and alive and open to the moment and to the need that's presenting itself in front of us now, and not preoccupied with the past or with the future, but paying attention to what's right in front of us. That is the stuff of miracles. And to get there does a remarkable thing. It does a remarkable thing for the people who see it happen. You see, in the end, it doesn't matter the road we're walking. It matters how we walk it.